Hello and welcome to Business Today Television. I'm Karishma Asudani, and joining me is Kuhu Joshi. She's a poet and teaching artist from New Delhi, but currently she's practicing and, in fact, teaching creative writing in New York. Kuhu, thank you so much for joining us on this Women's Day special.
Thank you, Karishma. Thank you so much for having me.
To start off with, and of course, I'm going to address the very obvious. Tell me, how has your journey been like? Especially, you're a young 29-year-old writer, a female protagonist in the world of writers. Tell me, how has this journey been like?
It has been a very interesting journey. I have been writing since I was very young, and I turned to writing to make sense of my experiences in the world as a woman and as someone who lives with a chronic condition. I have scoliosis, which was diagnosed when I was 12, and I always struggled to find language to understand my experience. That's how I turned to writing. For a long time, I was working as an economist and a writer, but I always wanted to pursue more creative pursuits and creative writing. So I started seriously focusing on working on my poems and writing poetry more seriously, which led to the publication of my book and also moving to New York to pursue a master's in creative writing at Sarah Lawrence College. And now I'm teaching creative writing and also working on another book, another project about similar themes.
Okay, I think it's interesting that you've taken this shift from economics. Was there something particular that really inspired you to make this shift?
Um, yes and no. I think in some ways I'd always been writing. I became an economist because I was interested in solving problems and writing, and it kind of helped me do both. And it also gave me a lot of financial security, from which it was easier for me to then do something that I wanted to do for myself. I think for me, I needed some sense of, agency before I could take up a more challenging and less financially remunerative path as a poet and writer. Uh, that helped me with making the switch. But it was mostly a journey of, going back to who I am and doing what I actually am passionate about and love, and choosing that. At some point, I had to make that switch.
Okay. Your recent book, in fact, My Body Didn't Come Before Me, that's quite an intriguing title. What's the story behind this?
Yeah, I'll hold up the book. It was just for people to see. I know my background's a little blurry, but it's called My Body Didn't Come Before Me. And the story behind this is that as I mentioned just now, I was diagnosed with scoliosis, which is a spinal condition where your spine, instead of growing straight, it curves to one side. And this happens around adolescence, around teenage. And so my body was going through a lot of new changes at that age. And I started to feel a lot of body image issues and shame around how different my body was, how it wasn't holding up to the society's beauty standards and norms. And in order to, make sense of that and also kind of defy that and take ownership of my body, I think the title is kind of like a spell or a chant to counter that. For a long time, I felt like my body defined me or came before me or was more important than who I am as a person and how I'm perceived. And so I wanted to counter that and say, my body doesn't define me. My body didn't come before me.
Okay. And clearly, you do have a relation from your personal life in writing this book. Um, Tell me, was it taken well by the audience, by the industry? I mean, by your colleagues in the writing industry?
Yeah, the book has received a lot of positive reviews from um, mainly from younger women writers and readers, but also the older generation of female writers and people who are interested in the literary world. I think writing poetry from your personal life is becoming more and more popular and more like I think there is a desire for this amongst the audience. And I think that people do like reading stories that are true and authentic and take risks to share something vulnerable about your life or about your experiences in a brave and frank way, and also trying to defy the traditional stories and show that bravery in writing. So it's been well received. I've been quite happy with how it's being talked about, and I've had a lot of interesting conversations around navigating hospitals and being a young girl in a hospital where everyone else has more power and agency than you do about your own body, and not being taken that seriously. A lot of conversations around how women navigate relationships. A lot of conversations around also like how did I write this? How did I switch from being an economist to being a writer? So it's been very interesting, and I've been very grateful for the reception that the book is getting.
Okay. Thank you for sharing with us, because I'm sure it's not been easy for you to pen down your thoughts and to get your emotions for the audience to understand. It's definitely a sensitive issue, but um, do you wonder, Kuhu, I mean, do men also face this? Is it any time a matter of discussion for them, or it is more about, in the women clan?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I definitely think that men also face challenges with body image issues. We're all kind of held up to these beauty and physical standards, and how we appear, and being conscious and self-conscious, definitely. And in that way, I think that male identifying people or men who read this book should also be able to see some of their emotional challenges there. So there are feelings of just shame, feelings of negativity about the body or the self, and feelings of frustration or helplessness around being given a diagnosis of some sort. Those are challenges I can see men struggling with, and they'd be definitely be able to connect to that. I think in writing this, though, I didn't necessarily have a male audience in mind. I think I write for my younger self. As a writer, you usually have some sense of an audience in mind when you are writing. At least I do. And I'm like, who am I talking to when I'm writing these poems? And I think for me, it was a younger version of myself, or like younger people who go through something challenging in their life and have to deal with that. Yeah.
Okay, great. A quick question before we end this interview. It's, of course, Women's Day. And while that is also debatable, because a lot of us believe that we don't need a specific day dedicated to us, because that cuts us from being equals. But do you have any word of advice for young female writers who are aspiring to continue in this field? What would you like to share with them?
That's such a great question. Thanks, Karishma. Um, my main advice would be to take your voice seriously, take your story seriously, believe that you have something valuable to say and contribute, that your voice matters, and read a lot, and that will help you read other female writers, read other just writers in general, and that will help you strengthen your own voice and your writing.
Okay, thank you so much for speaking with us and for sharing. We wish you great luck with your upcoming books that you've
Thank
been
you so much.
working on, and the projects that you're involved in.
Thank you so much, Karishma. Thank you for having me.